Hello and welcome to our Data and Collaboration webinar series brought to you by Omnix. This is the first of two webinars looking at data in the BIM environment. Tomorrow, we'll look at data security, an area that's becoming a growing challenge for the industry, and I think that's going to increase in the coming years. Today, though, it's data integrity and collaboration in project delivery. We'll focus on collaboration between the supply chain during a construction project. We'll look at strategies that allow a company to put in place best practice for successful collaboration, the sharing of data across a common data environment, and practices that will take a client through the life cycle of an asset. My name is Rob Jones, partner at B2B Connect, and I'll be your host. We'll kick off today with a panel discussion, and this will be followed by a presentation by Nabil Nougha from Autodesk. Then we'll move into audience questions. If you'd like to ask a question, and we hope you will, use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. So moving straight into the panel, we have gathered together an expert set of speakers from the industry for today. Joining us are Adrian Castillero, Associate Director, Digital Transformation, Data and Digital Platform at Boston Consulting Group, Gavin Britton, Director of Technology at Atkins, Tim Shelton, Global Product Owner at Arcadis. So you'll notice Tim's job title has changed slightly. He's been promoted in the last couple of days, so congratulations, Tim. Magzoub, Project Technical and BIM Manager at Trojan Holding, and Alain, Waha, Digital Transformation Lead at Buro Happold. Gavin, I'll start the conversation with you. Is the end-to-end process from design to handover joined up enough so that collaboration happens and data can flow through right through to the operational asset?
Yeah, very interesting question, Rob. And I think I'm sure my colleagues will agree on the call that I think we've got some real specific challenges around this in the industry at the moment. I think that we do have quite a fragmented approach when it comes to information exchange, from the point at which we're looking at a potential project at the master planning and feasibility stage, all the way through to that handover and operations and maintenance phase. For me, I think we're quite good at it in our individual segments of that fragmented life cycle. But in terms of the collaboration and the passing of information from one aspect of that life cycle or to a different stakeholder, I think there's a lot of work to be done still in order to best enhance and extract the value from the information that is available to our ultimate clients and the asset owners. I think we could be extracting far more value than we currently are doing from the data that's available to us, both in efficiencies plus in operational and capital expenditure too.
I guess taking on board what Gavin has just been saying, Adrian, the question for you is there the motivation for data sharing between that value chain, so, within a construction project?
Yeah, so I'm coming out from the industry, so I'm going to be giving what I understand is the best perspective. And thank you for having me today. In my opinion, definitely no, in general. And it will depend a lot on the maturity of the organizations and the ecosystems where we're working in. Stakeholders doesn't always perceive the value of sharing the data and being collaborative. They wonder what is it to them. So this is something that is really relevant. And we know out of the context that collaboration is a good exercise and is bringing always value, higher value to the parts. And there are some examples on crowdsourcing, how, for instance, Lego, Unilever, PepsiCo, and Amazon Studios use crowdsourcing to share and get feedback and content from the customers or external stakeholders, bringing a lot of value. In more traditional environments like the one that we're talking about today, I think we can even motivate the value creation through trying to find a way to catalyze and create incentives for the companies and the people to share data and value. And this can be done, for instance, applying some KPIs based on rework reduction, specs alignment, ratios, etc., etc. You might be expert on this topic, and these incentives can be created through monetary value given even back to the companies or as part of the deal as well. So this is what I think it might be applied in this context.
Okay. So Tim, moving to you and sticking with the theme of the current discussion, how do companies create those joined up strategies around collaboration? Because if you're now having to collaborate, particularly if you're collaborating across geographical distances, it must mean that you need to change how you're working together, and particularly around things like data governance and considering the full life cycle of an asset.
I think collaboration is something in the industry that I don't think we're particularly good at, if I'm honest. Just due to the very fragmented nature of the industry, the onerous contractual relationships that were often forced on the supply chain. I think collaboration is inherently difficult right now. But I think with the accessibility and ability of technology and the fact that technology is now a lot less cost prohibitive, we can put it to new use cases. It's forcing us to adopt new working methods, which have to be founded on collaboration. But what is collaboration? To me, it's working together through trusted relationships for a shared objective. And I think there are different responsibilities on the whole hierarchy of the value chain in our industry around working together for that shared objective. I think, from an employer's perspective, they're the ones that really have to share or articulate and define the vision and the ambition that they have, that then the supply chain need to deliver against. And it's really up to them to help define and evolve the instruments against which they can incentivize, to use Adrian's comment, to incentivize and entertain new ways of working. And I think, unfortunately, at the moment, we as an industry, we're not quite there yet. And we've made progress in the past through partner agreements. I know the UK very much prides itself on new ways of working and driving the whole theme of innovation and a new sense of value outputs as opposed to just standard project outcomes. There's some best practice to be looked at there, but when we try and scale that, globally, the different nuances that we have in each region of the world, I think, unfortunately, just unpack that in different ways. So I think, I realise I'm talking at a very high level here. Ultimately, I think we do need to take a quite an honest look at us in terms of how we actually deliver projects, the relationships and how those relationships are nurtured on those projects, and how we can really start to evolve the practices around contracting and procurement. I think first and foremost, data governance structures, all of that kind of stuff, that's evolving. That started really with BIM, I think, and the UK BIM mandate, that came out over 10 years ago now, I believe. We've got new international standards, got ISO 19650, which the industry can aspire to. So everything's there in terms of information governance and data governance generally. We just have to make sure that we upskill ourselves and find new ways of working that can actually really leverage that regulation. I'll resist talking about new operating models and agile working methods. I think it's later in the conversation. I think we'll get there, hopefully, and hopefully that'll put a bit more context around what I'm in now as well.
Okay, and actually we have one of the authors of one of the parts of ISO 19650 joining us tomorrow for our webinar tomorrow. He's worked on part 2 of that particular ISO standard. Alain, and actually interesting, Tim mentioned right at the beginning, listening to Adrian, and it was good to get an outside voice talking. And then I think in a way, maybe that's you as well, in that whilst you are very much in construction, and I do think, if I remember correctly, in the distant past, you were not. You worked in other industries as well, and I think you've tried to bring some of those practices into construction. But when looking at policies that need to be in place around data? What needs to be considered, and how do you get it right and feed this into the BIM model?
Yes, the question of how you feed it in the BIM model, I'll maybe leave for later, but I think getting those policies right and those incentives right from the start is key. You're right, I came from aerospace and automotive, and then I came to construction, and I did wonder what's going on here. It took me a little bit of time to work out why the industry was so far behind in the adoption of technology. And that's just because the incentives weren't there on one level, and possibly because technology wasn't quite ready. I mean, we have a very complex problem and very little money to solve it. So you know, technology needed to become radically democratic to put it to work. Having said that, the topic that we're exploring has been researched. Stanford talks about integrated delivery since the 90s. And so we have those methods. And I think what the research tells us is that where the incentives is right, what we need to do is put it in the contracts, because ultimately that is where the policy has teeth. That's the first. So the second part is you have to put it into the tech. The tech is the enabler, and I think it's becoming democratic enough to work. And then you have to put it in the processes, the method statement, those that you've signed up to through your contract. So these method statement, we've given in terms of data, the word BIM execution plan, you see that many, it's just a method statement. The contractual engagement of exchanging data, that's the exchange information requirement. We've got those language now. And so that's when, you know, that fragmented ecosystem that Gavin was talking about and the collaboration behaviors that Tim is talking about can actually be described and say, this is what we want to achieve. And it works. I think that's the main message that we need to share. At the top of Sheikh Zayed Road, you have a building, the Museum of the Future. You can't attempt a building like that if you're just going to go and do it the old way. And I think that's the message that I want to bring here, is that when we attempt it, whether you've put it in a contract or the building demanded it because you can't do it any other way, then it works. And it's bringing that evidence that actually describes a new operating model for the industry. It does work. You can reduce the fragmentation. You can exchange data. The technology is kind of ready. Just find a new way of delivering. Okay,
but again, it takes the will, doesn't it? People have to have that will to want to do it, and then the client must put in place the demand for it.
It is cultural, right? We have historically a very fragmented industry, and using technology has not been a winning strategy. It's only been a necessary strategy if you're doing the Abu Dhabi Louvre or you're doing a really hard project. But now it's actually being debugged, and those technologies are trickling down, and it's a smarter way of delivering the project. And the more capital hears it, client hear it, contractor hear it, that this is the way to have an easy life. You know, I think Stanford again coined the term post-heroic construction. You know, post-heroic construction means that construction is predictable. The external context is measured and accounted for. It reacts because the technology reacts, and then you do not have the project director, the hero that is going to solve all the problems. That, you know, no, there are no problems. It just runs, and it's actually quite challenging for a director that's, you know, solved so many problems and delivered so many buildings. Now it's just going to be, you know, it's going to run. It's no more heroes.
Well, that would be good to get to. But from your point of view, now you're looking, I guess, from a contractor point of view. Are clients changing how they want to work with you, especially when it comes to, say, the way teams work together and how data is shared? across again that supply chain from the different entities that are working on a project?
Okay, first, thank you, Rob, for this opportunity to discuss and share with you our experience and feedback in this regard. Definitely, yes, they do. So because it actually depends on the scope of work and the nature of the data to be shared. For example, when it comes to confidential parts like commercial and procurement data, they must be secure channels and tight closed loop in order to ensure non-spread of this kind of information. Actually, this is supposed to be governed, usually by data security protocols, either if they share it through web or physically. Other part of works, which is full under the common data field, sharing of such kind of data will be more flexible, but it still need to be controlled by copyright procedures. As contractors in construction field, this relation between us and the client is mainly defined in the contract from the first stage as per the agreed responsibility matrix. So yes, yeah, the client may change how the work is supposed to go under sharing that.
You're working in a situation where companies are dealing with internal and external collaboration. So is your goal to create, is the goal that you want to reach one where an integrated platform has been created that combines all of this and brings together advantages maybe that you're not currently seeing?
From BIM point of view, for internal team collaboration, as we all know, in every construction project, there will be different disciplines, which is technical, where all shop drawings and materials need to be tracked and generated and fit the model with it. We have also the commercial and procurement, which depends also on the packages and the materials assigned already inside the model. We have the planning as well. Planning, they should take care of the program, and the model will be used for them in the 4D simulation and the sequence and overall progress of the project using 4D software, as well as quantity surveying. Those guys also depends on the extracted quantities from the model itself. The last part, which is the most important, the construction activities, the people on site. So I believe, the success of the project depends on how these parts are well integrated and talk to each other in a smooth and effective way. So having a kind of a digital platform where all related information are combined, information related to the parts I explained before. All these informations are combined and collected together in one platform. This will definitely help in ensuring that up-to-date data is available for everyone. So if same platform, this internally, externally, I think if the same platform can be extended somehow to cover the external parties like client, consultant, and subcontractors, this will really add more advantage to the entire process of the project.
Tim, we've talked a lot about, obviously, because that's the theme, about data. We know that the industry is going to become increasingly reliant on data for decision making. Equally, though, how do you keep bias out of that data? And in a collaborative environment, who sets the rules that everyone follows? Because I guess if you start to normalize biased data, then you're going to normalize poor analysis of that data, which is going to affect ultimate decision making?
I think when it comes to the rules around data collection, the harvesting of that data, the processing of that data, the assurance of that data, in a, through the context of this industry, it's, that's usually delivered via the information requirements document, which gets issued as part of that procurement process and really just outlines to the supply chain what they expect in terms of, the way that information is collected, processed, assured, and then, how it's put to use. And I think it's how it's put to use is probably the most important issue when defining that employee's information requirements document. I think one of the disadvantages of the prevalence of technology and accessibility of technology is we can gather data on whatever we like, and we risk just being swamped by a bunch of data that we don't know what to do with. So really, you kind of, when you, as an employer or as a client, you have to get your mindset into not only you procuring a building or an asset or a road or a bridge, you're actually procuring data, you're procuring information from the supply chain. So what do you actually want? What are you going to use that information for? What are the decisions that you need to make of which that information is going to be useful for you? And that really, that's a very strategic question. As a business, what do you stand for? What are the sort of decisions that you routinely make? What do you want to optimize within your current business model? Where do you want to go? What's your purpose? And you really have to, consider all of those different things when you're putting together that information requirements document. And I'm really glad Alan actually mentioned the Museum of the Future project, because I was working for the client, Miras, at the time, and we were actually in the midst of defining our information requirements as an enterprise-wide document, which we were then going to use as part of a procurement, part of the procurement process for all of our portfolio of projects. And it just so happened that we had this rather interesting project at the top of Sheikh Zayed Road that was given to Miras in order to project manage. And we thought, well, as Alan said, you're not going to be able to deliver a project of that complexity without, properly articulating how you expect that information to be handled and how you expect the team members to behave in a collaborative environment in order to exchange and share that information for the outcome, which was, an incredibly complex and futuristic building, which was a symbol for, Dubai's innovation ambitions at the time. And the way that we actually defined that information requirements document was itself through collaboration. We consulted the supply chain, we consulted blue chip consultants like Buro Happold, who Alan was working for at the time. We addressed capabilities, we addressed where we maybe thought, where our requirements for information were, what the capability of the supply chain was in being able to deliver that information. And if we didn't think the capability was there, then we then had to kind of lower our expectations, or in some cases even increase our expectations around what could be delivered. And that really set the tone around how that document was defined. And to be honest, I think it was actually very well received by the supply chain when it got embedded in that procurement documentation. Unfortunately, then for us, we were able to contractualize that and make that part of the rules of engagement for how that project was going to be delivered moving forward and how that data was going to be transferred from one milestone to the next. So hopefully that gives a little bit of a flavor, I think, around, the rules of data exchange, the rules of information management, and more, I think, importantly, how businesses need to contextualize the information that they want and the decisions that they need it to help them make.
Gavin, I guess similar question for you, which is, so you're trying to make sure that you have all this data coming through, flowing through without bias, etc. How do you get all parties, client, developers, subcontractors, FM, on board with those rules? How do you make sure that there is that common data environment for the data?
All parties that you've just mentioned want this to happen. I don't think any individual is kind of resisting this to happen. We all want to collaborate. I think one of the main challenges that we have at the moment is around how we're procured. I think Alain touched on it earlier, and Tim was alluding to it just now. The way in which the supply chain is procured at the moment doesn't foster that collaborative approach and to enable us to want to share information between us. between the various different parts of the supply chain, which makes it a particular challenge until we start to get in the place where we are talking much more around alliance type approach, where we can enable much more of a collaborative environment where our clients have complete transparency. Each individual stakeholder has transparency of how a project or a specific area of that project is progressing, where some of the challenges are. I mean, one of the main things that's kind of really stifling progress on a program or a particular project at the moment is funding. So cash is kept back a lot of the time and used as a vehicle to try and push things forward, but actually it's counterproductive. If we had that transparency, then what we could do is actually we could put cash where it's actually required on that project. So in order to get people to follow those rules, I think first we've got to look at the way in which our commercial vehicles and the way in which we're contracted actually happen, because fundamentally those and the information requirements that Tim and Alain were alluding to earlier, that's okay in terms of we understand how we're going to exchange information. But I think Badr touched on it, right? In the fact that some of that information we still want to keep behind. And actually what we need to get into a place where is we're completely collaborative. We're all in a common goal. We know what the outcome is of that project or that program. And once we're all bought into that goal and that vision, and the right commercial vehicle is in place, that will enable us to then be able to much more openly say, yes, I can follow these rules. I really see the value in exchanging information between all these different parties. And actually the clients can then be a lot more trusting of their supply chain in order to be able to push their project forward in the way in which they want it to be pushed forward as well. So I think from my perspective, it's definitely, there's some fundamentals around commercial vehicles, contracting, alliances, and it's got to start from that position. Otherwise, yes, we'll understand when and how we need to information exchange, but what information is exchanged there'll still be around 80% that isn't exchanged, right? That if actually we exchange the full as much as possible, we'd all get there quicker and everybody would extract a bit more value from it, in my opinion.
Well, and interesting, you mentioned the word trust there. And I think that brings me quite nicely to my next question, which, Alain, is there enough trust between parties for successful collaboration? And how do you create it? How do you create that trust around data so that it has more value?
Yes, that trust is at multiple level. I think first, obviously, there's the prima facie of trust. Is the information useful? Can I trust it? Is it high quality? Has it been distorted? Is it as per the contract? All these things need to be in place. And Tim mentioned earlier, is the organization providing the data capable of doing that? Have they got the systems in place? Have they got the QA process in place, etc.? And I think that obviously is an enabler, is to be able to have trusted data. But then we get to the next level of trust in each other as commercial partners. And I think that's what Gavin was really focusing on, is that we're not going to get into a more transparent world of data where we could be collectively identifying efficiencies and collectively gaining from this. This is not going to happen for as long as we're in a situation where we're very adversarial, and we've been driven over the last 100 years towards procurement behavior and procurement way of, I just buy cheaper. The way to deliver the project is about contracting commercial levels. And we're not looking at identifying better way of delivering, which are better for the project. And I think when we talk about these contracts, these new form of contracts, what we're trying to say is, can we trust in each other to identify better way to deliver the project? And have we got the contractual and the trust position so that actually, you know, the cake's going to get bigger and we're going to share it equally? And do I trust my partner? And that is extremely hard to put in place. And it's going to take more than a contract. It's going to take the cultural movement, the cultural journey of saying, actually, there is a non-heroic way of delivering. And you know, when you look at that journey in manufacturing, it was really interesting, right? Because ultimately, a lean supply chain in manufacturing works because not only do you trust that they'll be able to share the information, but you trust implicitly your partners to exchange transparently the data they have in their supply chain, their level of stock, etc. Because that's the only way that you reduce capital employed in the supply chain, is by reducing the overall level of stock in the supply chain. It's not enough to just say, I have no stock and I'm putting you 99.99% with a huge commercial disincentive. The immediate reaction is the supplier puts a buffer stock into their supply chain and the price goes up. So totally, you know, the opposite of what the end project was trying to achieve. So we have those understanding of designing high trust supply chain. They exist in other industries. I don't think that today we've really made that translation yet, but it's coming. It's coming.
It's coming. So Badr, are you seeing that improvement, and how are you trying to maintain that collaboration as a project progresses?
Again, from BIM point of view, we are in Trojan. We are actually aiming to implement BIM in all projects, and we are working good in that. So I believe that maintaining collaboration through project progress depends on the availability of the qualified, skilled members who are really knows how to deal with the BIM platforms and BIM softwares, as well as the suitable software itself. This will lead to ensuring that all related construction data which extracted from BIM should be always ahead enough in order to avoid any delay impact to the project. But in general, collaboration process, as I mentioned before, this has to be agreed between all stakeholders through clear responsibility matrix. So it will lead us back to that trust issue. So all need to be very clear in this responsibility matrix. So
now, when we talk to people about data and about how data is used, shared across a project, etc., people often talk about creating a single source of truth. So I think this is quite an interesting area. Does a single source of truth exist, and is this the right way of thinking? How is this helping a project?
This particular topic brings as well talks as well on the data sharing collaboration aspects that Badr was mentioning, as well as Alain and Tim, as well as the trust issue. Philosophically speaking, yes, single point of truth always exists. The thing is that, do we know which one is the single point of truth and the single source of truth? So if we don't know that, we need to be able to set this consensus. It's like language. We are all speaking here from different places, different nationalities, different environments. We all speak in the same language in our way. So we have to find the same common baseline so we can talk to each other properly. Maybe this single point of truth may vary or evolve over time or extend, which is okay and it's fine, as long as coming to your environment from the as designed to the as built, there will be more and more information available and more details, right? So this single point of truth might extend over time. Now, so what we have to do for sure is to make sure that is really existing, that we work again towards this single point of truth, and understand and acknowledge the complexities to find consensus and think about the more standardization, the most standardization as possible, as well as setting the proper governance to define this single point of truth. And ultimately, it's all about technology. I mean, all this cannot happen if you don't have the proper technology behind that. We're talking about BIM today. There are other things on top of that that I think we're going to be speaking about that later. So I will not untap the topic, but it will all depend on technology as an enabler to be able to sustain this single point of truth.
And it's interesting you talk about there may be more than one, or which single point of truth is the correct single point of truth. And Alain, I know that you talk about connected truth. So how is that different?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Adrian talks about the single point of truth, not the single source of truth. And single source of truth, got a bit of a following, I think single point of truth is more precise because it eliminates this idea that there is like one place where all truth resides. And this is totally impractical, of course, in the built environment. And, this is where we know this instinctively, we build the industry around drawings and document centric. And so we have complex document numbering system. And this is how, historically we've done information management is by declaring metadata, the file name, the file number, so that we can find it. And we know which is the current latest, that I'm building from. I'm looking at Badr and thinking, this is one of the biggest questions, have I got the correct information? And of course, now we've moved into a data-centric world, a cloud-based world where the information can be distributed. And I think the single spot of truth is really, really an interesting concept, because ultimately what we're doing now is reconnecting our ecosystem. You don't need to move the information. It can stay where it is. You don't want to image it. As soon as it's imaged, you've lost linkage. And you can see it working at a really technical level and at an abstract level. At a technical level, we know that things that are big can't move through the bandwidth very fast. So you make local copies, and the first thing that happens in the background is called a cache, right? Your web browser, for example, would say, reload the cache. Why? Because it has a local image of the data. It's presenting it to you. It's very responsive, but actually it's maintained a link with the original spot of truth. So it knows if the truth changes to refresh and refresh in the cache. And this same context can happen when we are actually delivering a project with hundreds of parties working around the world. The site might come to a point, and it happens so many times, Tim, well, in Museum of the Future, the site is happening, construction is happening, a trade wants a change, and it needs to be approved by the engineer, but the engineer might sit in New York. So we push that request inside the model. The model would then be served to the engineer in New York. The engineer would review it, approve the change, and it would allow the site to proceed. We maintained a single spot of truth for every single item that went into the building. And we're going to have a talk later on by Autodesk, and many tech vendors now are offering those solutions. It's really this pivotal moment where we're going data-centric and connecting the truths, and everybody, that truth propagates, needs to be controlled. And I'll leave that to Tim and Gavin. There's a lot of governance, but it's very exciting that we're getting there finally.
So Gavin, I think one of the things that's quite interesting here is that we're starting to see more organizations getting ready for or already beginning to use digital twin. Now, obviously that's something that I think that's changing the way people think about the project process, because you start thinking about what you need to do up front to be able to successfully run that digital twin. So how do you make sure that that data passes from the capital to the operational phase successfully? What has to be in place?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, Rob. So, and just touching on kind of how we're seeing this a bit more, I think what we're actually seeing, rather than seeing it as a digital twin per se, but what we're actually seeing is that people are starting to understand the value that they can extract from the data that they have. And not just about where we currently are in that life cycle, but later on down the track. And I think what's important is, and I think Tim will touch on it, but it's important to understand what the end state is in order to understand what you want to do from the start. So certainly what we're doing with our clients at the moment is we're not trying to talk about digital twin per se. We're talking about what are the foundations that we need in order to enable that later. So that when and if the owners then decide that they want to transition into that phase of the maturity life cycle, we are then readying them for that. And we do that obviously by we've mentioned an EIR, an employer's information requirements, but there's a number of other documents and a suite of documents that really need to be in place and really need to form a part of their operating model. So that's the asset information register, the asset data dictionary, all of these types of document suites. And as our clients mature, they can even go as far to start defining their own libraries and their own content that their supply chain can use, because that will then ensure that they have a quality or a consistent input from their supply chain that they can then utilize and then hand over post-design into the post-contract and construction phase, and also then into the operations and maintenance phase. But what's going to be incredibly important, and I think Tim articulated it really well earlier on, is how that is governed throughout that life cycle. So it's really important that once we've got all those foundations in place, it is assured the data is quality checked, and the information that's being exchanged is governed by the client or a client representative, so that as that passes through, then the client, if they so wish, if they have that aspiration, they can start to connect the dots and start to get a digital twin with whatever the use case is that they want to get at the end.
So Tim, I think this is something you're looking at as well, and Gavin, was just pointing to some of the things that you've been doing. So where do you see it from when you're interacting with clients and contracts?
And yeah, I mean, thanks, Gavin, for that introduction into this answer. I think, it hit a lot of the principles on the head there. I think, running short of time, I know, but I think one of the most important things that you need to consider as a client before, requesting that digital twin from the supply chain is, again, I was alluding to it earlier, is looking at that digital twin through the context of how it can then support you achieve your strategic objectives as a business. What's the end state? What are the decisions that you need to make that digital twin is going to help you with? Do you want it in order to optimize your maintenance regime in the future? Do you want it to give you a wealth of design or data around human interaction with that asset that you can then inform future assets if you're a large developer with a huge pipeline? Lots and lots of different things you can do with the digital twin. And the worst mistake you can make is just going to the supply chain and saying, I want a digital twin, I want it to do everything. Because then it's just going to fall over. You're going to end up with something that isn't fit for purpose at the end of delivery of the information model. It's going to cost you a lot of money, and ultimately you're going to bring on the wrong suppliers in order to provide you with that information. So it's just got to be a well thought through articulation of what you want that digital twin to do, which will then define actually the information that will be fed into that model, so you can actually have everything at your disposal to make the decisions to run a very successful business.
Finally, Adrian, I think just before we move into Nabil's presentation, I just want to ask you very briefly about what you're seeing, again, because you've come from a slightly outside view, what you're seeing around things like e-contracts and blockchain, because that has to be something that the industry aims towards in terms of the transparency that will bring towards collaboration.
many companies are already using blockchain to trace the source of the materials, the raw materials, and they're putting that as part of the delivery given to the end customer. So they know the end customer can really fulfill the necessity to buy, for instance, ecological products, or for instance, is using diamonds to avoid blood diamonds distribution. I mean, blockchain is something that will help and is helping on driving this distributed single point of truth. It resolves the trust issue because all parties have consensus on every transaction, which is good for your business as well. Avoids asymmetry of information, which is something really bad when it comes to trust and relationship between different parties. It helps to maintain the traceability as well, as every single transaction is going to be recorded, so you can really know what is going on in every step of the supply chain. And finally, on the blockchain only, ensures resiliency and security of the information, because it cannot be tampered. I mean, you cannot tamper a blockchain because it will be too cost effective for whatever the party that wants to do that. And then what is going on the e-contracts or smart contracts and embedding IoT devices, and this link pretty well with the BIM models and tools, is that you will fully align your BIM models throughout the project lifecycle. You can trigger payments automatically, so you will not facing cash in issues in the future. You can issue certificates, initiate warranty periods, etc., and all managed through a secure process through blockchain and e-contracts. So I think this is the future, to be honest. Yeah. Okay. Sorry if I overextended.
No problem at all. So what we'll do is we'll move from our panel discussion now into the presentation. This will look at the future of distributed and flexible work environments. Now, giving this is Nabil Nougha, Technical Sales, AEC, Plant and AWP at Autodesk.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here with you, and thanks for the opportunity. And basically, in a very short period of time, I will give you some information and metrics on the current shift happening on the AEC space, and why at Autodesk we see that everyone needs to perform that shift to be more resilient and adapt to the future. And some information about the massive investment in our collaboration platform and how it fundamentally responds to all what has been shared during the panel discussion right now. Because it's all about predictability, multiple stakeholders, internal, external, the IT democratization, the extension of the BIM model, access to be more efficient to other departments like procurement, HR, site workers, to become that single source of truth, that digital twin with trusted data and more. But all this in a nutshell. So apologize for that. Some of you who already attended some Autodesk University classes or some webinar, you might have already seen that safe harbor statement, because we will talk about some development and evolution of some of our tools and the collaboration tools that we are delivering at Autodesk. So given that, I move to the topic. And at Autodesk, we spend a lot of time thinking about the future and the future of the thing that we build and the way that we do these things. Also, we spend a lot of time on thinking on the way we communicate, the way we collaborate, and how we perform as a team within a company. And collaboration, which is the subject of today within the AEC space. Considering that, everyone knows that the post-COVID world is looking different. It's looking different politically, economically, and in terms of the built environment than the pre-COVID world. So we need to work together to forge not a new normal, but a new better, to create spaces and processes that are better for all of us, and as we are entering that new world. And in reality, it's an opportunity to rethink the AEC ecosystem, because we are all acting as innovators now, and in ways we never imagined before. These are just some few metrics about the situation. Before COVID, the world was on track basically to deliver $2.6 trillion worth of multifamily residential building and $2.2 trillion worth of transportation project, spurred in the increase of the globalization and population shift to city centers. So you can see in that screenshot some different segments and with different evolution according to, I mean, what happened basically in 2020. We see some segments who are somehow declining, some are increasing, and the most important thing to know here is basically the infrastructure segment, which is having huge needs, and the demand continued to progress even during the COVID period. And the common point, the bottom line of all these segments basically is the collaboration. How people could perform in terms of collaboration, the way they could adapt during this period was key for those who could basically profit and benefit from this challenging period. And let's talk now about this one of the challenges which have been identified as a central concern for the whole AEC community at any stakeholders level. And this is the need for remote, flexible, and hybrid work. And it's now becoming a trend and a sign of companies adapting their staff and project to that new normal. This is basically an area where Autodesk has been investing in for a while. And 5 years ago, we launched the first version of our core cloud product, BIM 360 Design, which allows the design team to work collaboratively from any location. And after COVID life, many challenges happen for your business. But from the other side, it also presents a lot of opportunities for growth and reinvention. One of your biggest challenges right now might be figuring out how to stay competitive. And you might be wondering how you and your team might do that. Saying that we extracted what can clearly make your companies and organizations stronger than others. So you need to work from anywhere. You need to be able to mobilize your team from any time, anywhere, on any work. From any location, from your home or from a remote office, or when collaborating with external partner. You need also to work on anything to better manage disruptions. You want to be able to empower your team to adapt quickly. This means having fewer silo systems and more integration, less restriction and more flexibility. You don't want another disconnected app. You want technology to cover multiple use cases, file types and workflows and more. And you want also to work with insight. You need to move faster with more efficiency using data for better decision making. You don't just store data. You want to make sure it's working to help you to extract actionable insight and manage a project efficiently, keeping teams on the right page and at the right time. And to achieve this, your industry needs technology with efficient, dedicated solution. So the solution needs to be connected. You want to connect your team with tools and data all in one place to improve productivity and avoid rework. You want to be able to collaborate in your preferred design tools and communicate progress in real time. And this in a way to manage any documentation on a single platform. You need also to be flexible and support any AEC workflows, including horizontal and vertical BIM models. And you need to be powerful. The solution basically needs to provide secure access and data storage, and the data should be centralized in one place. You need to learn from analytics and insight with this data. And very quickly, as a reference to that, during the critical period between February and April 2020, the number of Revit models in the cloud has doubled. We have heard from customers who began the COVID with a minimum of usage in terms of work sharing, and their project in the cloud have moved to 100%. So here some data snapshot from April 2020 to a few months later. It was used in more than 150 countries, and some of our largest customers has even connected over 100 offices during that period using that technology. Revit Cloud Work Sharing supported approximately more than 40,000 projects, and the rate of new project creation jumped around 400%. And we had 9 million synchronization during that period, with across almost 200 Revit models uploaded and evolving in real time. This was never reached before. So today we definitively have the proof of a new possible in construction, but we are always considering that there are ways to do even better, and more specifically, how to constantly adapt and make the most of the opportunities and trends into this industry, which is always a challenge currently. So beside these increasing pressures and demand, we also hear from all customers, owners, general contractors, subcontractors, about the many challenges you face every day. And on top of that, many trends are directly impacting the construction outcomes today and shaping the industry for tomorrow. But we see more and more AEC stakeholders translating those challenges into challenges and trends into opportunities. And in reality, it's an exciting time for the construction industry. So the fragmentation of the data has a huge and direct impact on the project outcome across all levels of the organization. So teams are disconnected and working from outdated information due to multiple apps or even the complete lack of digital adoption, leading to loads of wasted time and security issues due to unnecessary people on the job site. On the project level, the disconnection between the office and the field accounts for massive avoidable rework impacting project cost, quality, delivery time, and profitability. And there is a massive impact at the business level as well. Unused and lost project data is hugely reducing potential opportunities such as portfolio visibility. The construction industry urged for more connection from people to data, and technology plays a key role within this opportunity. Here is a quick overview of the new platform. It's simplified and streamlined capabilities, the embedded workflows out of the box and deployable instantly on a unified data environment, having insight capabilities and efficient administration control, which better connect any AEC project lifecycle from the design to the handover. We basically dematerialized again the IT heavy requirement and adapted the legacy command data platform to better suit the AEC stakeholders globally. And this having the same benefit as the previous version, like unlimited project and unlimited storage capacity. And this being even flexible as before, being connectable and customizable with a third-party application through the Forge open platform. So now let me quickly deep dive quickly on each modules. For those who already use the BIM 360 platform, they'll understand that evolution. And for the others, it will be a great overview. So Autodesk Docs remains the bottom line for the data and all documents by being even more powerful and format system agnostic. Autodesk BIM Collaborate, which now includes real-time design collaboration, automated coordination, and enables even better now designers for better construction prediction and handover to site workers. Autodesk Takeoff which enables a powerful quantification system, which is capable for smart interaction between engineering and procurement personas using the same BIM data up to date and in real time. And Autodesk Build, which now aggregates construction management features from previously dispatched modules in one single module, offering an entire solution from cost estimation, quality, project and safety management, accessible in one single place for project delivery. And with that, I finish my very short presentation.
Okay, so if we bring everybody else back in now, and we'll move to audience questions. Before we do though, actually, Nabil, I've got a question I just quickly wanted to ask you. I was looking at your slide on the fragmentation, and you talked about what, 35% of time wasted, $280 billion of rework, and 96% of data collected not used in the industry. Those were global figures. Do you have any sense of what it's like in the Middle East and what's being done to try and eliminate that?
Yeah, we don't have this geographical reference. However, what I can say is that it's impacting any location these metrics. And yeah, we for some reasons we cannot really share geographically. But I mean, and I even don't have those metrics personally. So yeah, it's definitively impacting. However, it's impacting in any location where construction is happening. That means everywhere.
Okay. Okay, so audience questions. Moving to one here. Alain, I think this would be you, but actually if anybody else wants to join as well, please feel free. As computation increases design complexity and more parties contribute to a coordinated model space, how do we overcome the interoperability barriers between programs without restricting us to one vendor?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first part is a statement, computation increasing design complexity. Maybe it does, maybe actually it helps us increase representation and resolution of representation through RPA. So that's one for Adrian. But this idea around how do we collectively work in single model space? That's a really, really interesting question. And Nabil just described Autodesk technology answer for this. And it's fascinating. I mean, we've moved from document-based to file-based and now data-centric. And at a baseline, you can just buy commodity tools and really Autodesk in that sense is the great democratizer, right? You have literally hundreds of thousands of people going into that vendor solution. And whether it is necessary for them to make it difficult to then make that data come in and out, because technically it's a huge challenge, or is it a strategy? I think that's wherever you want to sit. I believe that today the need to go into a single platform it can be avoided. We have increasing number of technologies that allow you not to go towards file-based, because file in IFC is all about design representation of the thing, not of the design itself. And so what we are saying is that we have an incredibly diverse ecosystem, and each of them will want to have tools. So whether you make use of Autodesk open APIs in Forge, or you go in a fully interoperable world of Blender, you've got Spectral System, it's an open system. Where Happold has released its own open interoperability system, which is open source, and it connects to BIM 360. So I think we are saying that as the maturity of technology increases and the maturity of the industry increases, there will over time really eliminate this question around interoperability, and it's just going to be something that you know how to deal with.
Okay, does anybody else want to add to that? I mean, it's Badr, for instance, I don't know if you heard the question, but is it something that you think about in terms of how you overcome interoperability barriers between programs without restricting yourself to one vendor?
Yes, it is just only one simple question to Nabil. As per our previous experience in dealing with BIM 360, we are facing, it depends. The quality of the process itself depends on the size of the model. So that is why we, to have a good result, we are like forced to use a small size of models to share and do this kind. So is there any solution for this, as per your knowledge and in your updated versions or something?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, in terms of performance, we should have a huge increase in terms of performance when we move to the collaboration platform, as opposed to a traditional way to exchange like FTP or specific file exchange systems. We used to have Revit server before the BIM 360 platform, and we basically enhanced dramatically the speed when you synchronize in the cloud. And there are some steps which needs to be considered, especially the first upload. For example, when you do a first upload, the platform will trigger the metadata as well. So for example, if you upload a bulk of different file formats, including PDFs, the platform will automatically recognize some text within the PDFs. It has an OCR capability that you can reuse later on. You can leverage those texts, and this might slow down a little bit the first upload. But then after, when you are well settled, this should be really faster. So then there are other parameters like the ISP, the internet service provider of the country, or other security, which might have been put in place, like proxies and others, which might somehow slow down the connection. But globally, we see a huge performance improvement. So I would invite you, Badr, to contact myself or even any of your Autodesk representatives to try to figure out what's happening in your connection. We would be more glad to help you.
I'd like to echo that, because I think what we have to work with is that the performance increases doubles every 18 months. We know that. And so, Museum of the Future was fully into BIM 360. Yes, we have issues. There always are issues if you're pushing the technology. But that is something that's intrinsic to know about using technology. If technology becomes something intrinsic in your firm, you need to understand technology. There are things that I'm expecting in an iPad or in a phone, and things that I don't, right? I mean, it is extraordinary that we've, in our lifetime, been provided with a tricorder. It was science fiction, it was Star Trek, it's now a tricorder, it's in our hands. But it still doesn't teleport, right? And I know that. I'm mature enough to know that. And I think this is where it's very interesting to understand. If you're in a WebGL web browser, there is a 2 gigabyte limit, right? So you need to know these things. You need to know what's the size of the model. You want to control it, right? So for example, in Buro Happold, every single save to central is imaged, and we have automatic management of model sizes. But when we say model size, we mean container size. We don't mean model size. We could have the whole of Qatar in a model, but actually each container is different. And so then we pull those data up, and it's incredibly powerful. But the key thing is you have to have that know-how in the firm, because technology is how you perform today. And so it has to be part of the firm.
Adrian, you wanted to comment on the initial question as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry because it got the spinning towards one very technical topic, and I don't want to disrupt this particular anyway. So just to add on this particular comment, so I fully understand the conflict on multiple vendor systems applications in the company ecosystem, right? And it's not only, it will not be only Autodesk in the engineering side, it will be as well whatever your ERP or whatever your other systems that you have to get connected. So the way the industry is moving, and this is out of the industry and it's been applied in oil and gas, it's been applied in public sector, in telco industries. So we go for what we call DID and DDP, what we call in, apologies, in BCG DDP, but just the concept. So it's creating a layer in which your systems get decoupled from with a set of APIs. They get decoupled from the original core systems or your design systems, your ERP systems, et cetera, et cetera. So you create a layer of data through APIs that will allow you to have this interconnectivity. So if tomorrow you need to migrate whatever the application, one minimum functional application that you're using, you can still reuse this API, replace this particular system, and your architecture of functionality on top of this data layer will still continue to work. So, and this is something that is going on, as I'm saying, in the oil and gas and traditional companies like telcos, as well as public sector, right? So creating this layer of data to decouple from the vendor dependency and the data dependency, or the lock-in data dependency, right? Typically in my industry, we will talk about SAP or Oracle dependencies. In your case, you're talking about the AutoCAD or similar kind of vendors dependencies, right? So this is a good way of trying to sort out these issues.
I think it's worth giving it its full name, Adrian. It's Data Decoupling Platform, DDP.
No, it's digital and data platforms, but yeah, so, but it's given the name. Yes, you're right. We can play with that, yeah, with acronyms.
And I think we see it in every firm that we're creating, for example, with Nabil. And you know, if you choose Autodesk to be your data repository and BIM 360 being your data repository for a lot of your models, then you establish through Forge a secondary layer that you then maintain your dictionary, whether you're pushing into a dashboarding through Power BI or whether you're pushing towards quantification through an ERP. All that needs to be part of what a modern construction or design company does. It has to have its core data layer, data platform from which it builds all its products. And Tim, that's in your title.
Absolutely, it's my challenge, right?
Can I just very quickly, one other question. How do you change, and I think it's useful you've unmuted, I think it's probably you or Gavin, maybe even both. How do you change procurement cycles to also meet this aim of greater collaboration?
Sorry, just repeat the second half of that question, Rob.
How do you change procurement cycles to also meet this aim of greater collaboration? Something actually I think you alluded to earlier as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to set up procurement practices and procedures to enable you to buy things differently. You know, you're effectively, you become purchasers of information as well as an asset or built asset, you know, in our industry. And that requires a different approach, ultimately. You have to be aware that you're procuring different information from different parts of a broader ecosystem, as Alain was mentioning earlier in the session as well. So I think the only way you'll get there really, you know, to close that gap between client need and, the ability for the supply chain to deliver is just through collaboration in itself. In the same way that, Miras, developed their information requirements back in the day when, when Museum of the Future was being conceived, we consulted the supply chain in order to understand what the supply chain could and couldn't give us. The same needs to be, the same spirit of collaboration needs to be established when we're talking procurement policy. That's ultimately where we need to be. And we need to make sure that, procurement ends up in contracts where the risk is placed with the stakeholder that is best able to manage it. End of. None of this onerous risk transfer, busting your supply chain anymore. Those days are over if we generally want to, step into this brave new world of technology and innovation. We have to be more open, with our, with how we interact and how we engage with our, this new world of ecosystem vendors.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your time today. Thank you, audience, for joining us and listening to our conversation today, which I hope you agree was really insightful, actually. So thank you, everyone on the panel, for your time today as well.